This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so this past week, everybody did chapter 2. And chapter 2, Mike and Nina, was all about needs, but that's something that you and Nina and I are going to have to go back, and we're going to have to catch up on chapters 1 and 2. But tonight we're going to move into 3. But let me ask Greg and Jessica while we got them right now, what did you think of chapter 2?
I think it was helpful for me to sort of force me to really think about what Jessica's particular needs are, and sort of making me have to know who she is and what motivates her, and what makes her feel comforted and what doesn't. So I thought it was a good exercise from that perspective.
Yeah, that's exactly the point of the chapter. So yeah. So what happens, Mike, in chapter 2 is there's a list of the 10 most common emotional needs, and you are to pick out the 3 that are most important for you to receive from Nina, and then you guess at what the 3 most important ones for her to receive from you. So then when you sit down and have what's called a marriage staff meeting, which we're going to talk about, then you discover what each other's 3 most important needs are, and then the point from the objective from that point forward is to, of course, focus on those 3 most important needs of your partner. So that's all about chapter 2, and we'll go ahead and move on now to chapter 3.
Okay.
Chapter 3 starts on page 17. And you got the copy of chapter 3 that I sent you, Mike?
I do. I have it in front of me. What is this book that you pulled the chapters from?
I can barely hear you.
I said, what is the title of this book that you pulled the chapters from?
Title of the book is Intimate Encounters.
Oh, okay.
And when the last email I sent to you, I said I was going to be sending it on Monday. Well, guess what? Right. Monday was a holiday. Yeah. It went out this afternoon, so you'll be getting it. But I'll make a note to myself to send you chapter 4, just in case you don't get the book.
Okay.
Okay, so chapter 3 is entitled "What's Filling Your Emotional Cup?" It says, perhaps you've noticed conflicts in your marriage are inevitable. Inevitable, yes, they sure are. For my wife's name is Carla, and when we got married in 1978, and for the first 20 years we had conflict until we took this class. This class saved our marriage, and the reason that we took this class is because Carla had heard about it, and so she came to me and she said, "I'd like to take this class, and if you don't want to take it, then I think it's time to throw in the towel." So that was after 20 years of marriage, and it was pretty bad. Most of which was me. I was very self-centered, very selfish, very egotistical, very independent, self-sufficient, know-it-all, never wrong, opinionated. I had the full gamut of Greg, you can't look at Jessica like that.
No, that sounds more like me than anything else.
Okay. So when we started, when she said that, I said, okay, let's take the class. And in the back of my mind, I said, and hopefully God will fix you, because I didn't need any fixing. I was perfect. So, but I soon found out that this book is not about getting Carla fixed. This is all about me. It's a book that is addressed to each one of you individually, and what you can do to be a better spouse in your marriage. So this chapter on what's filling your emotional cup, if you take a look at page 18, the first part of the chapter is all about this emotional capacity cup. And if you notice, starting at the bottom, it starts out that there are hurt and sadness and disappointment, and that turns into anger and resentment, which turns into fear, anxiety, and insecurities, which turns into guilt and then condemnation. Now, notice that all of those negative things that can happen, that can build up in a relationship, if you don't sit down and talk and work things out, those things will build up and eventually sometimes blow. So there's no room, if you got all those negative things in a relationship, there's no room, as you can notice there in that depiction, for positive emotions. No room. So there's no room for joy, love, affection, romance. It's just all a bunch of negative stuff. And that's exactly where couples end up just before they get a divorce. They don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Everything's so negative, so nasty, so ugly that there's no room to have anything good, anything great. So what we need to do, what we're going to be doing in chapter 3, is we're going to begin to take a look at some of the things that we have done in our relationship that have hurt our partners. And hopefully we will be very honest and open and vulnerable, and we will be listing some of those things and talking about them in chapter 4, so that we have to empty that emotional cup in order to move on. I heard one time something along the lines of that sometimes when we go down the aisle at a marriage ceremony, we are towing a U-Haul trailer behind us with all kinds of unresolved hurts and crap. So what we need to do is get rid of it, and that also becomes a way of life. Once I teach you how to get rid of things, it also becomes a way of life. In that, if you guys ever had, like Carla and I did, if I did something that hurt her or bothered her or made her sad, or disappointed her, she would sometimes not talk to me for a couple of days, or 2 or 3 days, or 4 days even. And so I'm being very mature about it. Whenever I noticed that she would clam up and not want to talk to me because I'd hurt her, I would very maturely just tell myself, well, I'm not going to talk to her then either. So it was two very immature people holding on to some hurts and not taking care of our hurts. Is that Nina now?
Good evening.
Yeah, she's here.
Hi, Nina.
Hello.
Get you both in the picture there. Get close to each other. There you go. Good to see you.
Thank you as well.
So we're talking about page 18, this emotional capacity cup with all these negative things in it that we need to get rid of. So it's a process that we're going to talk about on page 24. You're going to be writing this week 2 lists. The first one is called Healing Marital Hurts Worksheet number 1. And on page 26, it's Healing Marital Hurts Worksheet number 2. Okay? This is a tough place, Mike and Nina, for you guys to jump in, but you can handle it. You can handle it. I know you can handle it. So this on page 24 is Healing Marital Hurts Worksheet number 1. It says, think about all the ways in which you have hurt your spouse and your marriage or your relationship, since you guys are not married yet. Think back to your dating days. You go back actually to the day you met, because there may have been something on the day you met where you hurt your partner in some way, shape, or form. Think about your engagement, your early marriage. Allow God to show you any behaviors. Now, these words now coming up here are very important. These will help you to remember things that you have done that have hurt your partner or that have disappointed your partner or has saddened your partner, okay? Were you ever selfish? Were you ever critical? Were you ever insensitive, disrespectful, verbally abusive, unsupportive, ungrateful, unfaithful, rejecting, or unforgiving? And you want to be sure when you write this list to consider any specific hurtful events, any specific hurtful fights, arguments, or scenes that you need to be writing down. When I think of scenes, I think of something that a couple shared with me recently during marriage counseling. He was telling me about, he was asking her, because the rule is that, Nina, you cannot rag on Mike. You know what I mean by that? You can't rag
Yeah.
on him. And neither can Mike rag on you. And so he asked her, he said, can I bring out a subject and we can talk about it and work on it and maybe resolve it? It was when we went skiing last year. And she said, sure, let's talk about it. And so what happened in this scene was that she was skiing. They were skiing together, and she had a Bota bag. You know what that is?
No.
It's a leather bag that you put wine in, and you got a strap on it, and you wear it over your shoulder. She had that Bota bag full of wine, and she was drinking that wine, and she got a little bit sauced, a little bit snockered, and so he wanted to get her off the hill as soon as possible. So they got down the parking lot, and they had a fight in the parking lot, and she very immaturely went over, pulled her pants down, and took a leak there in the snow in the parking lot. Well, when I hear the word scene, I think of that. I think of that scene that they had described to me. So what you're going to do is you're going to write, and you're going to be very specific. And the list that you're going to write, you're going to try to remember everything that you ever did that hurt your partner, that saddened your partner, or that disappointed your partner. Some things you're going to remember right away, other things you're not. For this next week, I want you to try to really focus on remembering anything and everything you possibly can. Now, before I go any further, again, I said earlier that Carla and I took this class after 20 years of marriage. So you can imagine the list of things that we had when we did this chapter. Our lists were pages long, single-spaced pages long. You guys aren't going to have that long of a list, but try to be very conscientious. Try to be very to remember anything and everything you possibly can. For the following reason: if something happened, let's say for example, Greg and Jessica, that Greg, you did something that hurt Jessica's feelings, okay? And you said at the time, you probably said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry," or "I apologize." And Jessica possibly did not, she's thinking to herself, "Yeah, right, you're sorry, all right. But I don't believe you are really sorry." So my point here is that I would venture to say that there have been apologies in the past for which your partner is still holding on to some of it. Would you agree? Not the men, more or less. Men tend to, things go on and it's no big deal, we move on. But ladies, it sometimes they hold on to some things, and even though we apologize, they sometimes hold on to things. That's a generality. That's not always true. Okay. So I would venture to say that there are some things that have happened in the past for which your partner is still holding on to it. In other words, they're not forgetting it. It's still there. So what we need to do is we need to get it out, put it on the table, and get rid of it. Now, in this chapter, I want to say this now and I'm going to repeat it later. You are going to be writing the list only. You are not going to be sharing the list with one another. I have to teach you next week how to share those lists with one another. Okay? And also, your book. You're not, one of the rules which I didn't mention in the very beginning, the first week, is you cannot look at your partner's book. Okay? You cannot peek and cheat in your partner's book, Greg. Okay? No fair peeking into your partner's book. So, let's move on. Oh, one last thing about this list of things that you did that hurt your partner is be careful when you write this list, like on page 25 where it says, avoid rationalizing or blaming. If you rationalize or blame your partner, you're not taking responsibility for what you did. That's like going back to kindergarten and saying something to the effect like, "I wouldn't have pulled your hair if you hadn't taken my dodgeball." Okay? That's what happens in kindergarten. Now that we're getting older, we need to be mature. We need to take responsibility for our action, not be stubborn, and we need to ask for forgiveness. So don't rationalize or blame. Your list is just going to be straightforward. I did this. I did this. I did this. Okay? I was unforgiving when this happened. I was selfish when I did this. I was critical of you when in front of your parents a couple weeks ago. I was, etc., etc. Okay? Just going to be a list of I did this, I did this, I did this. Okay? Now, the second list, Healing Marital Hurts Worksheet number 2 on page 26. Says identify the ways in which you and your marriage have a relationship have been hurt by your spouse. So this is the first list again, is this is a list of things that I have done. Second list, This is a list of things that you have done. Okay? I really wanted Mike and Nina to be able to experience this class, but I was really worried about you guys jumping in at this level, because the first two chapters kind of build you up to this point. now you're at the toughest two chapters of the whole book. So bear with each other and try to be conscientious and work this out. So identify the ways on page 26 in which you and your married relationship have been hurt by your partner. You want to be sure these lists start with feeling words. Feeling words are enjoy. I felt elated. I felt anger. I felt hurt. In other words, words that you feel. So in other words, if you take a look at some of the examples there, I felt hurt and rejected when you pulled away from me the other night in bed. I felt unsupported and unappreciated when you didn't notice the hard work. I haven't gotten over the fact that you lied to me. I felt rejected when you went out with the guys. Okay? How you feel. I felt jealous when you looked at that other woman the other day, okay? When we were walking down the street. Starts out with the word, each on this list starts out with the word I, and then the feeling, and then the example. I felt rejected when I went to hug you and you didn't hug me back, okay? I felt. Now, uh, you're going to be in both lists, you're going to be including past and present hurts, past and present disappointments, past and present uh, sadness about things. Now, I say past and present. It is very important that you bring up those past things. Some people sometimes have told me, I don't want to bring that up. That's just going to open a can of worms. Well, let me tell you something. If it's being thought about, then that can of worms is still in existence. That can of worms is open, and it needs to be emptied and gotten rid of. So let's take that can of worms and let's work with it. Trust me, you are going to, although this exercise of writing these two lists is going to be extremely difficult for you. And then in the next chapter, getting rid of the two lists is going to be a little bit difficult. It's going to be, I think you're going to find it to be, as many couples in the past have said, that's the most refreshing thing I've ever done in my life. Getting rid of those past things, and now being able to, now that I know how to do it, typically we just, whenever we get into an argument or a heavy discussion, we just kind of, it becomes an unresolved issue. But there will never be an unresolved issue in the future because you will know how to handle it. Carla and I could not handle anything. Whenever we started discussing something, I would get mad or she'd get mad. We didn't know how to communicate with one another. So it's that first chapter on communication, which you were able, Greg and Jessica, did you ever get a copy of that and listen to that on communication?
Is that
That was the recording.
the first chapter?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
Finally, we did it, yeah.
And that's something that Mike and Nina that I got to share with you too, is on communication tools, how to communicate. Because sometimes I think in all of my years of marriage counseling, when couples come to me, the number one thing I notice immediately is that they do not know how to communicate. Honestly, openly, vulnerably communicate. If they can honestly, openly, vulnerably communicate with one another, they don't have problems. There might be sexual problems, but they can talk them out. There might be blended family problems or discipline problems with kids, all kinds of problems, mother-in-law problems, all kinds of finance problems, all kinds of problems that people can have. But as you can honestly, openly, vulnerably communicate with one another, you don't have problems. So that's the most important thing in a marriage, is that honest, open, vulnerable communication. And especially when it comes to being hurt, being saddened, or being disappointed by your partner. You need to be able to honestly, openly, vulnerably communicate with one another about those feelings. Okay? So, any thoughts, any questions about that?
I'm just concerned about this list.
What's that?
I said I'm a little concerned about this list. I mean, I set her off probably 3 times a day, so every day.
I can barely hear you, Mike.
I was just saying I'm a little concerned about this list. I set her off probably 3 times a day every day.
You're right there with him.
I couldn't hear the second part of what you said. You're concerned about the list?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, better.
All right. I said I'm a little concerned about this list because I make her mad 3 times a day every day, at least.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe in the very near future, we can help that situation.
I hope so.
We'll be working on that. As part of this class is helping us to communicate with one another to the point where we don't make each other mad 3 times a day.
All right.
That's a very good point. Okay. So let me ask Greg and Jessica a question real quick. You guys now have had a couple of chapters. Have you been doing your marriage staff meeting like I asked you to do them?
Yep.
Yes.
Sitting in kitchen chairs facing one another with your knees interlocked?
I don't know if our
We
knees.
haven't done the knee lock yet. Maybe we'll try that this week. But we do our staff meetings though. So.
Okay.
We like sit across from each other. I don't know if we've done this.
That's so impersonal when you sit across from each other. You got to sit up close. You have to sit. Mike and Nina, you have to sit in like chairs like you're in right now with your knees, and then even if you push your knees a little bit further up, okay, it's good. It gets very close and intimate, and you hold hands during your marriage staff meeting, and you look at each other in the eyes. It's awkward. It's awkward, but trust me, you're going to love it once you get in the habit of doing it. It's good. Trust me, you got to do it.
Put me in the danger zone.
We'll lock knees this week.
Okay. And then the number one rule in a marriage staff meeting, Mike and Nina, is that it is a listening exercise. Okay? It's like the movie Mission Impossible. Should you choose to accept this mission, your mission is to listen. Okay? When you have your marriage staff meeting, you're going to go back and forth and you're going to share with one another what you read, what you wrote, what you thought, what you felt. And your mission is to listen to what your partner says. When your partner is speaking, you do not get to interrupt. You try not to become thinking about anything defensive. and definitely you don't want to be out loud defensive and argue. It's a listening exercise. In other words, if Mike says something, Nina, that bothers you, you just let it go. Because your mission is to listen to what he has to say. Listening is an extremely important part of communication. We don't listen enough. We tend to, especially in a marriage relationship, we tend to get defensive. When somebody says, you did this, which is an attack, by the way, when you use the word you want to avoid that and use an I statement instead. Don't say, you are always coming home late. Okay? Share with your partner an I statement and say something to the effect like, I feel lonely when you're not home on time. Okay? I statements are extremely, when you use an I statement with a feeling word, it's extremely hard to combat. Whereas a you statement is always, because us human beings are made that way, a you statement is always going to get your partner in a defensive mode. Notice it sometime here in the near future when you say, Mike, you're doing this, you're doing that. Realize you've just put him into a defensive mode. Okay? Whereas just by saying, Mike, I feel upset, I feel rejected, I feel concerned. Okay? It's very hard to combat a feeling. So, this week, you're going to read your marriage staff meeting, and in your marriage staff meeting it says, do not share your lists with one another this week. Okay? Very important. You're going to write the lists, but you're not going to share them with one another. You have to learn how to share them next week. So no peeking at the lists, and don't share them. Okay? Any thoughts? Any questions?
Nope. We're good.
Okay. Well, that's it. That's all I had. It's a fairly short chapter. It's a tough chapter, but you guys will love it. Trust me, you'll love it.
Hopefully.
Can't wait to lock knees.
Well, don't just quit with the knees, Mike. I mean, Greg. Just keep inching your way. Okay. With that, in that position, with locked knees, holding hands, looking at each other in the eyes, it's an intimate, close relationship, and it's very, very hard to get into any kind of trouble that way. Okay? Jessica, don't let him get away with it, okay? Make him lock knees. Well, we have 3 other couples that are going to, I'm going to have to get off now and send them